Continuing our series on float fishing, we're going to show you how to set up a slip float 2 different ways. So it's winter steelhead time. Let's get ready and check this out. Setting up a slip float setup for salmon or steelhead is really straightforward and simple. In the case of winter steelhead here, I got 2 of my favorite riggings for a slip float. One with a rubber bobber stopper, and the other one is with a nylon or braided line. So these 2 are what you're typically going to find out there on the commercial market, and you can even make your own of the nylon tied. But for what it is, it's a bobber stop, a bead, a corky of flotation, and your float. So we're going to say the necessary items you need here. A bobber stop, that's the nylon one. You got your rubber bobber stops as well. A bead of choice, and a corky. I like to match the corky to give a contrast to scene. And then you have whatever float options you want. There's so many different varieties out there. They all work. You just got to find what you like best and what you're confident in. And we'll show you right here how to rig this up. So for the nylon bobber stop, it's on a little tube. So you slide the main line through the tube and you pull the cord off of the tube while keeping the knot intact. And then you take both tag ends and cinch it tight on the line. Now what I do initially is I don't get it super tight. I get it enough where it's going to free slide. And then I'll tighten it later once I trim the tags. Now then you take your little bead that comes with those bobber stops, and right there you could fish it just fine. However, I like to add a Yakima bait corky on top as well because it helps me know for a contrast standpoint, like for a clear drift like this with the green, I know when that corky is sitting on top of the float, my whole setup is maxed out to the bobber set depth. So it really helps with kind of just an extra indicator as well when you need something like that. So that is using the nylon version. And that's really all you have to do. Set up the bottom end with your weight system and you're ready to go. Most common you're going to see is kind of an inline float style weight like that. Tie her on and you're ready to go. Get your leader on and fish. But that is the standard nylon bobber stop sliding setup for float fishing. But there is a second way you can do this. You can do it with a rubber style on the stopper, so it's all preference based. But to do this, you thread the line through the little loop. There's about 5 or 6 per bobber stop setup here, and that just ends up being pushed from the wire over to the mono, and you'll see just a little bit of pressure, it slides over. And it works great. These can be secure, but they also are going to potentially slide, and I really feel like you can get doubled up on those to really hold the bobber stops in place the best. And I didn't mention it earlier, when you're doing a selection between the nylon version or the rubber, I like to use the nylon version if I'm running it on braid, because the rubber ones just tend to slide. But the rubbers work great on the mono version. So just like you see there, about the same thing setup wise, aside from the bobber stop being slightly different. Now, when you start looking at how this sets itself up, you have the different weight options. So I want to look at that real quickly because I think this is also a good thing to mention with how you not only balance the float, but there's so many different ways to skin the cat. Right, so if we just take a standard version and you run your normal float, matching the weight or slightly under for what you need. This is a 1/2 ounce size inline weight with a 25 gram clear drift float. So this is typically going to be what I run on the float setup to keep it balanced. And then I run a 1/16 ounce or an 1/8 ounce jig under that, and the float setup works great. So again, standard, and if you want, you can put a bumper bead between the float and the weight just to help protect a little bit more over time. But that's it. And the beauty of having it sliding, you can keep that right up against it, or extend to whatever depth you need. Another option is an egg sinker. Now these egg sinkers allow for a little bit more versatility of that sliding up and down the line, and you can use a swivel like you saw there to finish it off and tie it to whatever you need to for the next rigging. This one, however, you can tie with just the snap swivel. And in this case, the snap swivel will actually be utilized with a variety of different weight attachments that you can do to change on the fly. These other ways, you kind of have to cut the line in order to change a weight style, but something like this, you could clip on an inline weight, you could clip on a drift weight, a Dave's Tangle free. There are a lot of options to be able to interchange with, and you could go from being a vertical setup really to a bobber dog pretty quickly. So that gives you a little bit of versatility to it, but again, it's all preference at the end of the day to how you end up going about it, because those inline weights come in all sorts of sizes, and everything else on the market for drift gear really can be applied here with float fishing. Now, your final piece, it's got to have that tackle that you want, right? So whether it's a jig here for steelhead in the wintertime, or worms or bait, you can have whatever presentation you need underneath that float setup with the weight system you just chose. And that's going to be the slip float setup. Super cool, simple, but wanted to showcase it to you guys. And if you want to see another float rigging that's really killer in low water, check this one out right here.